I just finished watching the season 1 finale of Willow on Disney Plus. Oh man, I wanted to like this show so much. I was so excited for it because I loved Willow as a kid. People always, whenever I post a review or a video review of this show, people come into the comments and they always say, "Look, face it, Willow wasn't that good of a movie." Or look, this is all nostalgia. But I disagree. I think Willow was a very good movie. I think it was a great movie, in fact. It was one of my favorite kid movies, movies as a kid. And yeah, I'm sure that part of my love for it is nostalgia, but I've shown it to people who didn't watch it as a kid, and they've loved it also. The movie just does a lot of things right. It's got great characters. It's got great action. It's very funny, but it also understands when to be serious. It understands when you should play it straight and when you should play the gags. And it balances this very well. Even with a character like Mad Mardigan, who is often comic relief, he has some very serious and moving scenes. The brownies are pretty much only comic relief, but they're not in the whole movie. They leave the brownies out of the parts that are really, really deep and serious and scary. And yes, the movie does have, American accents as well as British accents. And it does use the occasional sort of more modern sounding phrase. Man Mardigan is a very Han Solo-like figure, right? Kind of a roguish, I don't care about anybody but myself until, obviously he does. But it keeps those in check. And now the show, on the other hand, just doesn't know what kind of tone it wants to set at all. Throughout the entire 8-episode run, it's swerved between sort of glib, teenagery, like fake teenagery speak. Like this is written by people who think they know how teenagers talk, but that's not actually how teenagers talk. Teenagers actually don't like it when shows think they know what teenagers sound like. Like if you just wrote them as people, they would sound more realistic, and teenagers would like that more. Crazy, I know, but it's always had this sort of it's constantly leaned into this sort of glib, jokey tone up until the last few episodes when it finally had some more serious moments. But the problem is when you reach the more serious, more dramatic conclusion finale, and the build up to that finale. The problem is that the show has not taken itself seriously enough and has not taken its own characters seriously enough for us to really care. None of this in the finale, of course, everyone reaches the immemorial city and they find, that the crone has brainwashed Eric and there's this big showdown, right? We all knew this. Those of us who have watched, this is all very predictable at this point. The crone tries to, get into their heads and use an illusion to trick them, and they're not fooled. Neither Kit nor Laura is fooled. But they're trapped until Willow shows up and saves the day. I did like that Willow showed up to save the day. I like that he wasn't written completely out of the final confrontation in his own show. Like I always hoped that this show would be Willow sort of passing the torch to Allura. An Allura coming of age show with Willow as the guide and mentor. And it's done that to some degree. And here's the thing about the show, like to some degree it's a good show. There are good moments. There are good story beats. There are things that I like about it. And there is a part of me that really wants this story to continue. The ending of the season set up a season 2. But there are so many things that the show gets wrong. And that I would hope if they were to go into season 2 that they would have the humility and an understanding to make changes and fix these problems. For instance, like the modern music coming into the show, not just at the end credits, but again, in this episode, in the finale, we had modern music playing during the fake illusion wedding between Allura and Eric. And then at the very end, again, that same, another modern song comes on. Willow isn't about modern songs, and I know you don't have to be perfectly faithful to the original, but this is a fantasy show and it doesn't need modern music in it. And I've talked about the costumes before. The costumes are bad. They need to fix the costumes. They need to have a coherent costume design, like principle at play. Like all the costs, they don't all have to look the same, but they should all make us feel like we're in the same world. Even more exotic costumes in that world should still feel like they're in a fantasy world. Not a printed t-shirt, not dungaree hats, not denim jackets, not boots with like logos on the bottom. Like these are mistakes. These are sloppy costuming mistakes. They're not creative decisions that I disagree with. They are literally mistakes. They take us out of the world. And the dialogue, like the tone, like I was talking about a minute ago, that if the show could balance that out more, first of all, they need to dial back the modern aphorisms so much. They cannot use words like McSleazoid or Palace Ditz. They can't have lines like, ugh, you're such a dad. These are bad lines. This is poorly written dialogue. They need to scale that back. I'm not saying that it should sound like Middle English or like Lord of the Rings or whatever, but it shouldn't sound like we do. You know, I fed some prompts into ChatGPT, which is an AI writing software, just to like recreate a couple scenes from the show. And the chat bot, like the AI understands the tone better than the writers for this show. And that's sad. It's pumping out lines that sound like that maybe a princess would say to a prince rather than, maybe the high school prom queen would say to the high school prom king. And that's the problem with this show, is that it doesn't understand the difference. And again, it can have, like, it would be true to the source material to have some sort of more modern sounding dialogue and to have British and American accents, but you still have to have it be within reason, right? I feel like the last 3 episodes have definitely worked better for me than the preceding 5. But it's too little too late. Like, yeah, there was some good stuff in this final episode. I definitely like Alora more and Kit more. I like some of these characters more by the end of the season. But why did they need to treat them so poorly in the beginning? Like, why is Eric such a dope? Why didn't they make him why didn't they lean into his shortcomings that were more like pride? Or like, why didn't they present him from the outset as a character who maybe would succumb to this crone and her preying on his pride and his jealousy or his envy or whatever. Like, if they had shown us some of those characteristics early on and taken him seriously and not made him just kind of a goof, he's just a doofus, right? Make him like a princely guy who's got good and bad in him, and then show how he's tipped over the edge to the bad and then brought back over from the ledge for the good. Kit, it's kind of her story too, right? She's Mardigan's daughter, and she gets to wear the cuirass at the end, the Chimerian cuirass or whatever, which is, one of the better costumes in the show. Why make her so unlikable from the outset? She's just so hard to watch. The way she treats everyone around her, the way she talks, again, just like she's, plucked out of a high school in Santa Barbara or something, With better writing and direction, all these characters could have been a lot more interesting, and we could have rooted for them more. I think we had too many also. I just don't think, I don't care that there's a lesbian romance in this show, but I just don't think it really made sense. Like, it was too many characters with too many layers of like relationship going on. Like, they're presenting Kit as the protector of Laura, but then they have to have Jade be the protector of Kit. Well, who the fuck's going to protect Jade, guys? Like, don't we need another protector for Jade and then another one for, like, no, you don't need that many characters. You could have had an interesting relationship between Kit and Alora from the outset. Jade was superfluous to that. It's just to put, it feels like it's just to put that relationship in there to be, progressive and brave and all that. And again, I don't care that that's the relationship. Maybe it might have been interesting to have, Kit have a crush on Alora, something like that. But you have too many characters. Borman by the end kind of realizes, he realizes it's not his story, and he gives the cuirass to Kit. But that felt rushed and unearned. Most of these sort of character moments throughout the show, Graydon becoming a magician, Borman having that revelation, just most of these moments have felt unearned and rushed. The whole Crone and Eric stuff in the Immemorial City that happened over the course of one episode could have been much more interesting if they'd played that out longer and when we had not right away realized that this was the Crone in the first place. The Crone herself, all the monster bad guys were kind of cool looking, but the Crone is I don't know, not that interesting of a character. She certainly wasn't as, even with her like decaying face and everything, wasn't as scary or cruel or shocking as Bavmorda, who turns her own daughter into a pig, along with the rest of the army and Mad Mardigan and everybody, except for Willow and Finn Rizal in the movie, right? Bavmorda was a phenomenal bad guy. And the way she was defeated through a trick, an optical illusion, essentially, was such a clever way of toppling this evil queen. Whereas here it's a magical duel with wands and the magic crackling together. And while I think it was a cool special effect, we've seen this wand duel happen so many times. And it's the fact that they did it more interestingly between Finn Rizal and Bavmorda in 1988 than they did it here just speaks volumes to me. I do think they did some good special effects in this show. I do think they had some cool shots last week with the starry sky and stuff. I think Allura looks way better with red hair. It's the actress's natural color hair, I believe. And she's beautiful. I mean, she's really beautiful. And I think if they really, I think they could even see her acting chops come through more in these last couple episodes. I just feel like everyone was sold so short by this show. People say it's really bad acting, but I really think that the actors probably were okay for the most part. I might not have cast some of them exactly how they were cast, but like the actress who plays Allura, Borman, the guy who plays Borman is great. I wish they had given maybe him a little less. I wish they'd made him a little less comic relief and a little more badass, but sorry, still sick. Anyways, I leave the show feeling mixed. Like, it wasn't good, but I'd still want a Willow show, I sort of want a season 2 just to see if they can fix the problems with it, but I don't have a lot of optimism that they would. But I still want a Willow show. I'm sad that this wasn't as good as it could have been. Honestly, I hate it when people say, oh, if you don't like it, just don't watch it. Because you know what? Like, I love Willow, and I really wanted to like this, and I watched it even though I didn't. I watched it. That's how much I love the property, the story, the universe of Willow, and it's really sad. And I wouldn't be surprised if Disney just canceled this, because I can't imagine it got great viewership numbers. But if they make a season 2, I will watch it, and I will hope that they take out the modern music and that they dial back all this, the dialogue, and that they take seriously the criticisms that not just me, but many critics and fans have leveled against this show. I am not the only one saying these things. Sometimes I feel like I'm the only one saying these things. And I don't think it has to do with wokeness. Like, I see that criticism, and I think that there may be a little bit of that, but like, whatever. I don't think that this show really suffers from wokeness in the way that some other shows do. I think it suffers just from trying to do too much and not really understanding the tone that Willow set. And it's a real bummer that this show didn't understand that, because it had the original writer from the movie doing some of the writing, and it had, Jonathan Kasdan, who professed to be a huge fan and yet still somehow missed out on what made Willow so great. So I don't know. I'm bummed out by it. I'm more bummed out by this show than Rings of Power. Like, I didn't need Rings of Power. I didn't need a prequel series to The Lord of the Rings. I was fine with that one. But I always wanted some more Willow. And it's just a shame that this wasn't made, I don't know, 15 years ago. I just feel like maybe that wouldn't have been any better. They might have been, there's been this problem with fantasy being kind of not taken seriously for so long. It wasn't really until Game of Thrones that people started taking it seriously. And then at the same time, we had this movement where the adaptations always had to change everything so much. And that's, whether that's for wokeness or whether that's just because the writers are so clever, they think they can do it better, or whether it's just a lack of talent in general. That once fantasy was started to be taken seriously, it also sort of went off the rails, and that's a real shame. So, yeah, we're left with a cliffhanger at the end. Graydon wakes up, and an evil version of Allura is talking to him on this battlefield, and clearly that's not really Allura. Her hair is shorter, for one thing. And she's like, come join me and make a new world. And there's the one of those big two-headed monsters from the original movie out there. That was kind of cool. It's called like a Eber-Sisk. It's named after Siskel and Ebert. My true goal here, what I really want, is to be a villain. Is somebody to name a villain in a future Willow project or some Lucasfilm project after me. I've got a good villain name, Kane. It's one of the earliest villains in the history of villainy, right? Cain and Abel. So, Legacy of Kane. Okay, thanks for watching. Like, subscribe. Let me know what you think of Willow. If you watched the finale, what you think of the finale. And I'm going to also write a post about this, which I will link to in the description. Peace.